The Whisper of Olympus. The night begins softly. The world slows down. Far away, thunder hums over the Aegean Sea, low, patient, like a heartbeat beneath the waves. The air is thick with salt and memory. A single flame dances against the stone, painting the walls with restless light. In that faint glow, the gods begin to stir. Not as we imagine them, not golden or perfect, but as whispers of what we once feared and what we still desire. Let the noise of the modern world fade. Beneath the hum of electricity, the gods still breathe. They wait in the corners of dreams, in storms, in silence. Their voices are not gone, only softened, worn smooth by centuries of being retold. And tonight we will listen.
Once the world was new and trembling.
The mountains had names, and the sea still answered when called. Lightning was not yet science. It was a message.
Each flash across the sky carried the temper of Zeus, the restless ruler of Olympus, whose power both protected and destroyed.
Beside him stood Hera, the queen of storms and patience, her anger braided with pride.
Below in the dark water, Poseidon stirred, shaping tempests with a flick of his hand.
And deep under the earth, Hades waited, not cruel, only still, guarding the boundary between life and its echo. Above them all, the mountain itself, Olympus, rose like a memory carved in stone.
Its peaks brushed the edge of heaven.
Its silence carried the sound of every prayer ever whispered. And though centuries have passed, its stories remain, folded into language, woven into our dreams, carried in the rhythm of our hearts. So tonight, as the fire burns low and the world softens around you, we return there.
To that ancient hush before the dawn.
To the place where gods once walked among men, and the wind still carries their names. Listen closely. The mountain is breathing. The Whisper of Olympus begins. The chaotic family of Olympus. The children of the sky, the gods of Olympus. Above the clouds, where the air grows thin and light bends in strange colors, a throne waits among the thunderheads. Here lives Zeus, the one who rules by storm. His voice is thunder, his temper a tempest that never quite learns to rest. When he laughs, the sky trembles.
When he frowns, lightning finds its way to the earth.
But Zeus is not simply a god of power. He is the restlessness of power itself. He wanders through the world in many shapes, a man, a swan, a whisper of wind through olive leaves. Each form hides the same hunger, to be seen, to be desired, to be obeyed. He cannot sit still for long. The throne on Olympus is wide, but even it feels too small for his storms. Sometimes he descends to the earth in disguise, walking among mortals as if testing the strength of their awe. He gives gifts as easily as he takes them away.
He raises heroes, then watches them fall.
To love Zeus is to love a storm, brilliant, brief, and never yours to hold. Yet even a storm has a center, and beside him sits Hera, his queen.
Her crown is not made of gold, but of endurance, layer upon layer of silent years.
Each jewel glints with the memory of betrayal. She has wept in private more often than she has smiled in public. Hera's power is not loud, it is patient. She does not strike when angry. She waits until anger cools into precision. Her punishments do not fall from the sky. They bloom slowly in the lives of those who cross her. She is the embodiment of consequence. And though the songs often call her jealous, there is more beneath that word. Hera does not envy love. She defends the sanctity of promise. She understands the weight of devotion, the fragile threads that hold two souls together. Her fury is the fury of someone who remembers what loyalty is supposed to mean. Sometimes, when the night grows very still, she looks down from her seat beside Zeus and watches the mortal world. Families gathered by small fires, lovers whispering under the same stars that once witnessed her vows. Perhaps she feels pity, perhaps she feels nothing at all, but somewhere in her silence, the universe learns the cost of love's betrayal. Below them, far beneath the silver clouds and sunlit mountaintops, the sea breathes. It rises and falls like the chest of a sleeping giant. Here dwells Poseidon, brother of storms, master of tides. If Zeus commands the heavens, Poseidon commands the restlessness below. The sea is his mood made visible. In morning, it glitters with calm, a mirror of peace, blue and endless. By dusk, it darkens, heavy with unseen tempers. He is not cruel, only untamed. Every wave carries a thought, every current hides a grudge. Sailors whisper his name before casting their nets, hoping his gaze will turn elsewhere. They offer wine to the foam and small coins to the deep. For they know the sea is not to be trusted. It forgives slowly and forgets never. Poseidon's trident gleams in the twilight, stirring whirlpools and calling up creatures older than memory. He is the god who both nurtures and devours. Without him, the world would thirst. But with him, it must learn fear. He remembers his brothers, Zeus above, Hades below, and wonders sometimes which of them is truly free. For though the sea moves without walls, even it is bound by the pull of moon and wind, just as he is bound by destiny and pride. And then, deeper still, beyond coral and current, below the roots of mountains, lies another realm entirely. A world not of fire and brimstone, but of stillness. A place where even time slows down to breathe. Here waits Hades, the quiet brother, the keeper of what remains. No cruelty, only distance. His kingdom is made of silence and memory. The walls of his palace are carved from black stone that glows faintly in torchlight, like the inside of a dream. The river Styx murmurs softly nearby, carrying voices of those who once lived. Hades does not shout or strike. He does not crave worship. He simply endures. The steady pulse beneath all endings. To him come kings and beggars alike, stripped of name and crown. He greets them with the same calm nod, the same grave courtesy. Those who fear him misunderstand. Hades is not the god of death. He is the god of what follows. He keeps balance. Without him, the world would drown in endless birth, endless chaos. In his quiet realm, everything finds its place. Sometimes, when the upper world sleeps, he walks among the fields of asphodel where souls drift like pale petals in the wind. He listens to their murmurs, fragments of laughter, regret, unfinished songs. He does not judge, he remembers, and though the poets never called him merciful, There is a gentleness in his solitude. He understands what it means to lose everything and still continue. Perhaps that is why he fell in love only once, and why that love was stolen from him again. Even gods are not immune to longing. So the world stands divided. Zeus rules the air and thunder. Hera commands devotion and consequence. Poseidon moves the waters, restless and wild. Hades holds the quiet after it all ends. Together, they form the heartbeat of existence. 4 tempers, 4 truths, each echoing through the centuries in myth and in man. Their quarrels shape the weather, their love shapes the fate of mortals, and their silence shapes the night itself.
And if you listen closely, beyond the hum of the sea, beyond the wind that curls around the mountain,
you can still hear them, a low murmur between clouds and waves, between breath and memory. The whisper of Olympus, the story that never ends. The children of thought and fire. And yet Olympus did not sleep. Even as storms rolled and seas stirred, new shapes of divinity began to rise, not born from the earth, but from ideas themselves. From the fevered thoughts of gods came a new generation, bright and human in their contradictions. Among them stood Athena, calm, deliberate, apart. She was not born as others were. No cradle, no mother's arms, no cries.
She emerged fully formed from the mind of Zeus, a spark of clarity in the noise of thunder.
Her arrival split the air like light breaking from cloud, and where it touched, the world grew still. Athena carried wisdom like a calm flame, gentle but impossible to ignore. She saw patterns where others saw chaos, meaning in the ashes of destruction. Her gaze could turn rage into reason, war into strategy, confusion into clarity. To mortals, she appeared in dreams before great decisions, not as a voice of command, but as a quiet presence beside their thoughts, the whisper that says, "Wait, think again." While others ruled with power or passion, Athena ruled with understanding. Temples rose for her not in fear, but in respect. Her statues did not show cruelty, only poise. An owl perched upon her shoulder, and behind her eyes burned the patient light of endless thought. She was the part of Zeus that had learned restraint, the echo of wisdom that follows every storm. But balance cannot exist without its opposite. Where Athena was stillness, Ares was motion. Where she observed, he charged. Ares burned with noise and movement, his presence announced by the sound of clashing iron and the scent of blood in the wind. He fought not for justice, not for glory, but because silence made him uneasy. In the quiet moments between battles, he paced like a caged flame. Peace felt like suffocation. Calm felt like a wound he could not name. War was his language, the only way he knew to speak to the world. And though mortals prayed to him before battle, few loved him after. He left behind fields of victory that smelled of loss, yet there was something painfully human in him, a need to prove, to exist, to feel alive through conflict. Even gods are haunted by emptiness, and Ares carried his like armor. He loved recklessly, hated easily, and burned through everything he touched.
But when he slept, the world itself seemed to breathe easier.
Athena watched him often, not with contempt, but with recognition, for she knew that even wisdom must learn from chaos. Without Ares, her calm would have no meaning. Without destruction, her order would never be tested. They were not enemies. They were reflections, the two halves of a single thought, how easily brilliance can turn to ruin. And then, between them, walked Aphrodite, born not of war or mind, but of the sea's own longing. When the foam first touched the light of dawn, she rose from it like a secret the world had kept too long. Her beauty was not gentle, it was overwhelming, a force that bent hearts and logic alike. She was desire in motion, the ache of longing, the shimmer of what cannot be held.
Aphrodite walked through all hearts.
Kings, shepherds, even gods turned their eyes when she passed. Her laughter could ease sorrow or ignite wars. Her presence reminded creation of its hunger, to touch, to be seen, to be desired. But beauty, like fire, gives and takes. Those who loved her often lost themselves. Those who worshipped her found joy tangled with ruin. She understood this and smiled because she knew the truth. Love is not peace. It is the sweetest form of chaos. And from that chaos, another god worked quietly, far from the light of Olympus. Hephaestus, the smith. His forge lay in shadow beneath the mountain, where flame met iron and silence hummed with effort. His hands were scarred, his gait uneven, but his creations were flawless. He was the god of what endures after pain, the proof that broken things can still create beauty. They said he fell from Olympus once, thrown from the heavens for being imperfect.
His body struck the earth, but his will did not break.
From that fall, he learned something the others never could, that pain, if shaped with patience, can become art. Each strike of his hammer carried both memory and forgiveness. He built thrones for gods who had cast him aside, forged crowns for those who forgot his name, and made weapons that changed the course of wars he did not start. But when the forge cooled and the echoes faded, Hephaestus sat alone, not bitter, only quiet. He understood the secret pulse of creation, that all beauty costs something. From wounds he made wonders, from exile he made purpose. His fire was not rage, it was endurance. Aphrodite was his wife, though their bond was as complex as light upon metal. Love and loyalty seldom share the same shape. She brought color to his solitude, and he gave form to her radiance. Together, they embodied the meeting of longing and labor, the divine balance between what the heart desires and what the hands can build. And so in the hall of Olympus they all stood, the thinkers, the fighters, the lovers, the makers. Athena with her calm gaze, Ares with his restless fire, Aphrodite with her dangerous grace, Hephaestus with his wounded strength. Each of them carried a fragment of the human soul. Athena, the clarity of reason. Ares, the ache of struggle. Aphrodite, the longing to connect.
Hephaestus, the quiet courage to endure.
Together they reminded the world that the divine was never far away. It lived inside every thought, every conflict, every act of creation. For even in mortals those same forces move, the impulse to think, to fight, to love, to build. And when the night grows still, when the fire burns low, you might feel them near. Not as distant gods, but as reflections of what it means to be alive. A calm flame, a restless storm, a dangerous beauty. And a steady hand shaping something out of pain. The mountain sighs again. The whisper of Olympus continues. Soft as breath, bright as fire, endless as thought. The messengers and the seasons. And still the story climbs. The mountain hums with quiet light. From the forges and the feasts, from wisdom and war, the next voices rise, lighter, swifter, half smiling in the dusk between worlds. The first of them is Hermes. He moves like wind-given thought.
Light-footed, clever, never entirely still, he belongs everywhere and nowhere at once.
The air bends around him. The dust of his sandals carries whispers from both heaven and earth. He is the god of motion, of messages, of crossings, of all things that cannot stay. When Zeus sends commands, it is Hermes who carries them.
When souls lose their way, it is Hermes who guides them through the veils of shadow, his lantern flickering just bright enough to follow.
He speaks the language of all boundaries, the threshold, the gate, the road that never ends. And though he walks with the gods, he laughs like a mortal. Hermes has the heart of a trickster and the patience of smoke. He steals not from greed, but from curiosity, as if the act itself were a kind of question. He delights in the cleverness of creation, how meaning shifts, how one lie can reveal a deeper truth. His grin comes quickly, and his apologies come quicker. But behind that grin hides an intelligence sharper than the edge of Apollo's lyre. To mortals, he is the whisper behind intuition, that sudden impulse to move, to speak, to run toward something unseen. He is the spirit of the unexpected journey, the god who lives in every messenger's footstep, every gamble, every leap of faith. And though he outruns most consequences, even he cannot escape the rhythm of the world below. For beneath Olympus, another heart beats, slow, maternal, and vast. It belongs to Demeter, the keeper of fields and the quiet sorrow of the seasons. While others rule the heavens or the sea, Demeter rules what feeds them all. Her hands are the color of soil. Her breath carries the scent of grain. She speaks not with thunder, but with patience. Each spring she calls life from the ground, coaxing green from the brown, bloom from the bare. Each harvest she gathers it back with gratitude and restraint. But Demeter's power is not endless. It moves with her mood, and her mood is bound to love and loss. There was once a day when her laughter filled the meadows until the earth opened and took her daughter Persephone into the shadowed halls of Hades. The world turned cold with her grief. Grass stiffened into frost. The soil forgot how to breathe. In that stillness, humanity learned what it meant to hunger, not only for food, but for warmth, for return, for reunion. And so the seasons were born. When Demeter rejoices, spring returns. When she mourns, winter follows. The earth itself mirrors her heart. Even now, the rhythm of her sorrow governs every blooming field, every falling leaf. There is gentleness in her grief, the reminder that nothing truly dies, it only sleeps until it is loved again. When you hold a seed in your palm, you hold her promise. When you break bread, you taste her patience. She is the God who reminds us that even sorrow, when tended carefully, can feed the world. But the mountain does not end in silence or sorrow. From the shadow of her stillness rises another kind of song, louder, wilder, impossible to contain. Dionysus enters like sunlight spilled from a broken cup. He dances between joy and madness, between sacred and profane, between control and abandon. His laughter fills the air with warmth. His footsteps leave trails of vine and violet. He is the god of wine, of ecstasy, of the thin line where pleasure becomes revelation. To the mortals who follow him, he offers release, the sweet forgetting of boundaries. They gather in moonlit fields, voices rising, hearts open, masks falling. Through him they remember what it means to be fully alive, to lose oneself without fear. But Dionysus carries danger in his joy. His cup overflows, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with ruin. Too much of him, and reason dissolves. Too little, and the soul forgets to feel. He is contradiction given flesh, the calm after chaos, the tear in the middle of a smile. Where Apollo seeks harmony, Dionysus embraces dissonance. He teaches that madness and meaning often drink from the same spring. Even pain in his hands can become a kind of celebration. They say he was twice born, torn apart and remade. Perhaps that is why he understands both creation and collapse so intimately. In every song there is a wound, in every wound a song waiting to be sung. And as he moves, the night itself begins to sway. The trees lean closer, the stars pulse like drums. The world forgets its edges for a while, lost in his rhythm. When dawn finally breaks, he is gone, leaving only silence, wine-stained soil, and the echo of laughter that sounds a little like prayer. Hermes, Demeter, Dionysus, the messenger, the mother, the reveler, each different yet bound by the same invisible thread, movement. Hermes moves between places, Demeter between seasons, Dionysus between states of mind. Together they form the rhythm that keeps the world alive. One carries messages across the sky. One teaches the earth how to breathe again. One reminds the heart how to break and how to heal. And as Olympus sleeps, their influence ripples outward into dream, into soil, into song. The mountain hums once more, its voice neither divine nor mortal, but something in between. The whisper continues, soft and endless, that life is motion, that love is loss, that joy and sorrow are two sides of the same flame. The wind drifts higher. The sea quiets. Somewhere, the gods fade into memory. But their stories remain alive in the air,
retold each night by those who still listen.
The whisper of Olympus does not end. It only changes shape, from thunder to laughter, from harvest to silence, from dream to dream again. The light. The night deepens and the mountain breathes. Santa, far from the feasts and forges of Olympus where laughter and thunder fade into mist, a silver shape moves beneath the trees. Art, she, Psyche. She is the protector of the quiet and the lost, the child who wanders too far, the wounded creature that hides in the grass. Her compa to Tre, Artemis belongs to no one. Even the gods know to call her name softly. Her freedom is sacred, her distance deliberate. While others seek thrones and temples, she seeks silence. The wild purity of night, the steady rhythm of her own heart against the pulse of the earth. She runs, not from the world, but through it, her pace matching the turning of the moon. Each phase marks her passage. Crescent for the hunt, full for protection, dark for retreat. She is both shadow and light, both huntress and healer. When she draws her bow, it is not to kill, but to remind life of its fragility.
Mortals whisper her name before journeys, before births, before the long walk through uncertainty.
In her, they sense something familiar. The need to be both strong and kind, alone yet connected. She guards that paradox like a secret flame, fierce and tender at once, and far across the horizon where her moonlight fades, another light begins to rise, golden, radiant, inevitable.
It is the voice of her twin, Apollo.
If Artemis is silence, Apollo is song. He sings to the horizon, his music stitched into the dawn. Every note calls the sun forward, every chord reminds the sky to breathe. His light is both blessing and burden. It heals, but it also reveals. It warms, but it also burns. Apollo carries many names, god of the sun, of prophecy, of art and healing. But none of these capture his essence fully. He is brilliance personified, the clarity that comforts until it cuts too deep. His perfection is both beauty and isolation. He shines too brightly to rest. He plays his lyre beside the morning wind, and the world answers. Rivers shimmer, mountains blush. Mortals lift their faces to warmth they cannot touch. His music is the sound of order, of thought arranged into harmony. Yet, like all order, it is fragile. Even Apollo has shadows. Behind his calm eyes lies the exhaustion of someone who must always shine. He envies the night, the freedom of Artemis, the mercy of darkness. His radiance is a duty, not a choice.
And though his hands heal, they cannot heal themselves.
He knows the cost of brilliance, the loneliness of being the light everyone seeks, but no one truly sees. And so he pours his longing into song, into the trembling of strings, into poems that outlive empires. Every sunrise is his confession, every sunset his release. For all their differences, Apollo and Artemis are bound by reflection, two halves of one rhythm. She guards the quiet. He fills it with sound.
She moves through shadow.
He blazes through clarity, and between them the world learns balance. The tender pull between night and day, stillness and motion, silence and song. But even light and darkness must rest.
Even gods need a hearth to return to. And so at the heart of Olympus, hidden from storms and laughter alike, burns a single, steady flame.
It belongs to Hestia. She is the least spoken of the gods, yet the one no world can live without.
While others chase glory, she keeps the smallest flame alive. The warmth that never boasts, the quiet that never fades.
Her fire burns in every home, in every heart that seeks peace after noise. Hestia's gift is presence. She asks for no temples, no sacrifices of grandeur. Her worship is in the act of staying, of tending what endures. When mortals light their hearths at dusk, they honor her without realizing it. When families gather, when strangers share bread, when silence becomes comfort instead of absence, that is her domain. She does not move between worlds like Hermes, nor rule them like Zeus. She anchors them. While others burn to be seen, she burns to belong. Her light has no violence, no demand. It is simply there, constant, patient, waiting. Hestia is the memory of warmth after storm, the sigh that follows laughter, the still ember that holds the promise of morning. Even the gods return to her when their tempers fade, when their songs tire, when their wars end. They sit by her fire and remember what eternity costs. Together, Artemis, Apollo, Hestia, they form a strange harmony. One runs wild beneath the moon. One sings truth into the sun. One guards the flame that never leaves. They are not gods of perfection, but of balance. Flawed, powerful, eternal. Each carries a lesson older than words. Freedom without love becomes exile. Light without rest becomes blindness. Fire without patience becomes ruin. Olympus is not heaven. It is a house of endless motion, of tempers and tenderness, of brilliance and fatigue. Every thunder, every wind, every silence carries a voice. Every god is a mirror, not of something beyond us, but of ourselves. For when we run toward the unknown, Artemis runs beside us. When we rise to create, Apollo sings through us.
When we stop to rest, Hestia warms our hands.
They are not gone. They are simply quieter now, folded into the small rituals of being alive. And so the mountain breathes again.
Not as a monument of power, but as a heartbeat, soft and constant, echoing through the ages. The whisper of Olympus continues,
Not loud, not distant,
but close,
always close in the light, in the fire, in the silence that follows. The gentle trial of Eros and Psyche. A love between shadow and light. A love that moves between shadow and light. Once there was a girl whose beauty reached the ears of the gods. Her name was Psyche, quiet, mortal, radiant as dawn. They said that when she walked through the fields, flowers turned toward her as if the sun had returned too soon. Her name meant soul, and even the wind seemed to know it, but beauty, as always, stirs envy. Across the marble halls of Olympus, Aphrodite heard of this mortal girl and felt the sting of something sharp and unwelcome. How could a human face be praised above that of a goddess? How could worship, meant for divinity, drift toward flesh and dust? So Aphrodite summoned her son, Eros, the god of love, whose arrows decided the fates of hearts. His wings shimmered like pale fire. His eyes carried both innocence and danger. She gave him a cruel command. Go to this girl. Make her love what is unworthy. Make her fall for ruin so that she learns her place. But love, even when ordered, does not always obey. When Eros descended to the mortal world and found Psyche sleeping, the air around her changed. The candlelight trembled. Silence grew tender. He lifted his bow, drew the arrow meant to curse her. And then, by accident or fate, the tip brushed his own skin. In that instant, he felt his heart turn. Love struck the god who was meant to command it.
From that moment, Eros could no longer follow his mother's will.
He became the keeper of a secret love, one that hid between dusk and dawn. He built for Psyche a palace of silence and fragrance, a place made of moonlight and music. Each night he came to her unseen, his voice soft as breath against her hair. His touch was warmth itself. But his face, his true form, was forbidden.
He told her gently, "Do not try to see me. Trust what you feel.
And she did. In that darkness, love became something pure, unmeasured by sight or name. Their nights were endless and tender. By day, the palace shimmered with invisible hands tending gardens of silver trees. By night, they spoke of dreams and longing, of the strange ache that comes even when one has everything. Yet no mortal heart can live entirely in shadow. Doubt is a slow whisper that grows louder in silence. When Psyche's sisters came to visit, they filled her ears with suspicion. "What kind of husband hides his face?" they asked. "Perhaps he is not a god, but a monster. Perhaps you sleep beside your own doom."
That night, fear pressed close to love. As Eros slept, Psyche rose from their bed and lit a single lamp.
Its glow trembled in her shaking hands, spilling gold across the room. And there he was, the most beautiful being she had ever seen. Wings folded, lashes resting on his cheeks, lips curved in peace. Not a monster, but a god, her god. In awe, she leaned closer, but a drop of oil fell from the lamp and struck his shoulder. He woke in pain and sorrow. "Why did you doubt me?" he whispered. And before she could answer, he was gone, vanished like a dream at dawn.
The palace turned to mist.
The silence broke into wind. Psyche stood alone beneath the empty sky, her heart still warm from where he had been. Love had fled, and all that remained was the echo of its touch. Then began her journey, not of body, but of soul. She wandered the earth searching for him, her bare feet bleeding on stone, her voice calling his name into the hills. Every temple she entered offered no answer. Every prayer ended in silence. Finally, in desperation, she knelt before Aphrodite herself, the very goddess who had cursed her. The goddess's beauty was cold as glass. "If you wish to earn your place beside him," Aphrodite said, "you must prove the worth of the soul you claim to be." And so Psyche was given trials, impossible tasks meant to break her. First, she was told to sort a mountain of seeds before dawn. She fell to her knees in despair, but the ants of the earth took pity and helped her, grain by grain. Next, she was sent to fetch the golden wool of wild rams that could kill with a single charge. A whisper from the river taught her to wait until the beasts slept and gather what clung to the reeds. Finally, she was commanded to descend into the underworld and return with a box of Persephone's beauty, a gift meant for Aphrodite. The path was long, dark, and filled with the sighs of the dead. Psyche moved through it not with fear, but with a strange calm. For what more could be taken from someone who had already lost love? When she returned, curiosity overtook her.
She opened the box, hoping to take just a trace of divine beauty, enough to make Eros love her again. But inside was not beauty, it was sleep. It spilled out like smoke and she fell to the ground, breathless and still.
Eros, who had watched her suffering from afar, could bear it no longer. He flew to her, brushed the shadow from her eyes and kissed her back to life. "You have proved what even gods forget," he murmured. "That love is not power, it is endurance." He carried her to Olympus and pleaded before Zeus himself. The great god listened, then smiled. "Let her drink the nectar of immortality," he said. for even the soul that loves so purely deserves to live among us. And so Psyche was made immortal. The soul joined with love, forever entwined. Even Aphrodite, seeing her son's devotion, forgave. A grand feast was held in the golden halls, and all the gods attended. Music rose like dawn over the mountain, and for once Olympus felt still. Psyche and Eros became the union of two truths: that love, at its purest, is both shadow and light. It hides and reveals, wounds and heals, tests and redeems, and from their story mortals learned that the soul's journey is never toward perfection, but toward understanding. Sometimes love must vanish so that we may learn to seek it.
Sometimes we must fall asleep to be awakened by it again.
And even now, when night deepens and the world grows quiet, you can almost hear their whisper in the dark, the promise that every true love once lost will find its way home. The trials of the soul. She lived in dreamlight, suspended between love and secrecy. Every night his voice came to her like a memory she hadn't earned. Soft, certain, full of warmth. And for a while that was enough. But no dream lasts forever. Curiosity, like a seed of wind, crept into her heart. It came not with malice, but with longing, that quiet hunger to know.
Her sisters, envious and anxious, came to visit.
They smiled too sharply, their words smooth and poisoned. "Why does he hide from you?" they asked. "What kind of love lives only in the dark? Perhaps it is not a god you lie beside, but a monster." Their whispers clung to her even after they left. When night returned and the air filled with the familiar scent of his presence, her mind would not rest. She told herself she trusted him.
She told herself faith was enough.
But trust without sight is a fragile thing. One night, when the wind held its breath, Psyche rose from their bed. In her hand, a small oil lamp trembled. The flame quivered like her heartbeat. Slowly, she lifted it toward his sleeping face, and what she saw stole the air from her chest. He was no monster. He was beauty itself, a god radiant and human all at once, wings folded like light against his shoulders, lips parted in peace. She leaned closer, overwhelmed by awe, by love, by the need to remember this face forever. But in her trembling, a single drop of oil spilled. It landed on his bare skin and burned.
Eros woke with a cry that broke the silence.
Their eyes met, hers wide with fear, his full of heartbreak. "Why did you doubt me?" he whispered.
Before she could speak, he was gone, vanished like breath at dawn.
The palace dissolved around her, turning to mist and memory. Warmth became cold. Music became wind. She was alone. But Psyche did not break. She stood barefoot in the ruin of what had been love and began to walk. Over hills, through temples, across the long corridors of season and sorrow. She searched. Each dawn found her thinner, each dusk more determined. Even the gods watched, silent, curious at the sight of mortal endurance. She prayed at the altars of the world, to Demeter, to Hera, even to Aphrodite. None answered. until, at last, the goddess who had cursed her appeared, radiant and cruel. Aphrodite looked down at her, the air heavy with perfume and pride. "So," she said, "the girl who stole a god's heart comes crawling back. Do you wish to earn what you took?" Psyche bowed her head. "Yes," she said. "Then prove your soul is worthy of love," the goddess replied. And so began the 4 trials. The first was a mountain of seeds of 1,000 kinds, all mixed together in a single heap that reached her knees. "Sort them by dawn," Aphrodite commanded.
Psyche knelt, her fingers trembling.
Hours passed, and the pile remained endless. Tears blurred her vision. But then she heard a faint rustle, the small, deliberate sound of movement.
Ants swarmed from the cracks of the floor, each carrying a seed in its tiny jaws.
They worked through the night, grain by grain, until every seed lay neatly divided. When Aphrodite returned, her smile flickered, almost impressed. The second task was crueler.
"Go to the river," the goddess said, and gather the golden wool of the sun's rams."
Psyche went, but when she saw them, wild beasts glowing like fire, horns sharp as blades, fear held her still. She hid behind the reeds, her breath shallow. Then the reeds whispered, swaying in sympathy, "Wait until the heat fades. When they rest in the shade, you will find their wool caught upon us." And so she did. When dusk came, she collected the golden tufts tangled in the riverbank, soft as light, harmless as forgiveness. The third trial brought her to the edge of the world. Aphrodite gave her a crystal jar. "Fetch water from the river Styx," she said, "the black river of death, guarded by dragons that never sleep."
Psyche stood before it, trembling. The cliffs rose steep and cruel, the air thick with despair. She nearly turned back.
Then the sky split with the cry of an eagle, a great golden bird sent by Zeus himself.
It swooped down, took the jar from her hands, and filled it safely, carrying it through the coils of danger and back again.
When it returned the vessel, its eyes glowed with something like respect. "You are not alone," it said, before vanishing into light.
But the final task was the most impossible.
Aphrodite handed her a small box of ivory. "Go to the underworld," she said, "and bring back a measure of Persephone's beauty. Do not open it. Deliver it to me untouched. To obey meant to die." Yet Psyche did not hesitate. She walked to the black gates where the earth ends and the air turned still. She offered coins for passage and cakes for Cerberus, the 3-headed hound. Even death, it seemed, recognized the soul that would not yield. Through the shadowed realm she walked, her lamp now cold, her heart her only light. At last, the Queen of the Dead received her kindly and placed in her hands the small sealed box. "Guard it well," Persephone said. "It contains what mortals cannot bear." Psyche climbed back toward the world of the living, weary but unbroken. The sun's first rays touched her face, and she paused. The journey was almost done. Only one thought haunted her, that she was still mortal, still flawed, still unworthy to stand beside her divine beloved. So she whispered to herself, "Perhaps if I took just a little of this beauty, he might love me again." She opened the box, but inside was not beauty. It was sleep, deep and heavy, the stillness that lives between worlds. It poured out like smoke, folding around her body, pulling her gently to the ground. Her eyes closed, the jar rolled from her hand. Her breath stilled, and there, upon the edge of dawn, the soul who had walked through love and loss, through trial and terror, finally rested. She did not fall. She floated. The earth seemed to cradle her, the air to sigh in sorrow. Even Aphrodite felt a strange ache when she looked down and saw Psyche lying still, not defeated, but serene. And somewhere far above, the sound of wings began to stir. Eros was coming. The awakening, when love found the soul again. Eros found her there, lying upon the silent ground, motionless and pale, as if carved from moonlight. Around her, the morning had begun to bloom, the first light spilling gently over the horizon, touching her hair with gold. He knelt beside her, the air trembling at his arrival. For a long time he could not move. All the power of the heavens, all the wings and arrows and thunderous beauty meant nothing against the sight of her stillness. He reached out with trembling hands. His fingers brushed her cheek, cold, her lips, colder still. He whispered her name once, then again, until the world itself seemed to echo it. Psyche. The name meant soul, and in calling it, he gave it breath.
He leaned close and kissed her.
It was not a kiss of passion, but of remembrance, the first sound after silence. And from that touch, her chest rose.
A single, quiet breath filled her lungs.
Color returned to her face like dawn returning to the world. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw him, she did not speak. There were no words left large enough to hold what they had endured. For a moment, the earth was utterly still. Even the wind seemed to pause in reverence. Then Eros gathered her into his arms, his wings folding around them both, and the light that surrounded them rose into the sky like fire remembering how to burn. But love, even divine love, cannot exist forever in secret. The heavens had watched, the gods had whispered, and now Zeus himself stirred on his high throne. He looked down upon the pair, the god who had disobeyed, the mortal who had endured. His eyes were heavy with age and understanding. Eros, he said, his voice deep as thunder rolling through distance. You have defied your mother and the laws that separate gods from mortals. Yet what you defied, you did in the name of love, the one force even Olympus cannot govern.
He turned to Psyche, who stood quietly beside her beloved, barefoot and luminous.
The weight of the mortal world still clung to her, but her gaze was steady. Zeus saw in her not defiance, but devotion. And he was moved. He lifted his hand, and from his cup he poured a single drop of ambrosia, the drink of eternity, the taste of forever. He offered it to her. Drink, he said, and let there be no more divide between the soul and love. The nectar touched her lips, and warmth spread through her veins. Not burning, but blooming. Every scar, every ache, every trace of exhaustion melted away. Her heartbeat slowed until it matched the rhythm of the stars. The dust of mortality faded from her skin. She opened her eyes, and they glowed not with power, but with peace. In that moment, Psyche became immortal. the soul was made divine, the human was joined with love itself, not in fleeting touch, but in eternal rhythm.
Eros took her hand, and for the first time, the gods saw a union that was not bound by command or duty.
It was choice. It was equality. The joining of what suffers and what saves, what longs and what answers. A great feast was held in the halls of Olympus. The marble glimmered, the air sang with harp and laughter. Even Aphrodite, who once burned with jealousy, arrived clothed in calm. She looked at her son, radiant and gentle, and at the woman who had walked through shadow to find him. For a long moment her pride faltered. Perhaps even she remembered what love once felt like before it was worshipped. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than the sea. "Welcome, Psyche," she said. "You have suffered, but you have not cursed. You have lost, but you have not closed. You are one of us." And with that, forgiveness spread through the hall like light through crystal. Days passed, though the word day no longer carried meaning where they lived. Time softened into eternity. From their union was born a child, a daughter they named Hedone, the spirit of joy, of gentle delight, of all sweetness that follows sorrow. When she laughed, the air brightened. When she slept, dreams came easier to mortals below. She was proof that from pain can come tenderness, from trial, grace. The world changed in quiet ways after that. Mortals began to speak of the soul and love not as rivals, but as reflections. Artists carved them together, wings brushing against breath, light mingling with shadow. Poets whispered their names as prayers for those who had lost faith in tenderness. Eros and Psyche became symbols not of perfection, but of endurance, a love that had learned how to fall, how to forgive, how to begin again. Their story was told not to warn but to comfort, that even the smallest heart, if it keeps walking, may reach the divine. That love, when tested, does not fade. It deepens like light sinking gently into water. Sometimes, when the evening is still and the horizon glows between day and night, it is said they walk together again, a god and a soul, neither above nor below, but beside each other. He carries no bow now, no arrows, no disguises. She carries no lamp, no fear, no questions, only the quiet understanding that to know someone is not to see their face, but to recognize their breath in the dark. They move through the air like memory, calm, endless, inseparable. Their footsteps leave no mark, but their story lingers everywhere, in the warmth of a lover's hand, in the patience of forgiveness,
in the courage it takes to hope again. For love is not the fire that consumes, nor the lightning that dazzles.
It is the slow, glowing kind of light that endures.
Free of fear,
Free of time,
and when the night grows soft and your heart drifts towards sleep, perhaps you can still feel it.
a quiet pulse in the dark, reminding you that somewhere between shadow and dawn, the soul still waits for love, and love still remembers the soul. The story ends where it began, in light, in silence, in the space where breath becomes eternity. The quiet sorrow of Medusa. The beauty that turned into silence. The beauty that turned into silence. Long before the curse, before the whispers of terror and stone, there was a girl. Her name was Medusa.
She lived by the sea, where the wind carried salt and the mornings arrived softly.
Each day she walked to the temple of Athena, not as a priestess of power, but as a servant of devotion. Her hands were small, steady. She brushed marble floors until they shone with light, arranged flowers at the feet of the goddess, whispered prayers she never expected to be answered. Her eyes were gentle, her smile uncertain.
There was nothing monstrous in her, nothing divine. Only the quiet beauty of a mortal who still believed the world could be kind.
Sometimes, when she looked into the polished marble of the temple walls, she barely recognized her reflection. The girl who looked back seemed both near and far, as though her soul had already begun to live in two worlds, one of faith, one of fear. One night, the waves rose higher than usual.
The sea was restless, pulling against the moon.
And from that restless water came Poseidon, god of storms, of tides, of desires that take without asking. He saw her alone in the temple, the lamplight trembling, her head bowed in prayer, and he took what was not his. The marble floor that had once shone with innocence now held the echo of violence. When it ended, there was no thunder, no divine witness, only silence, heavy and human. Medusa lay there, the salt of the sea still clinging to her skin, and something within her, faith perhaps, broke quietly, without sound. But the gods see everything, and they see through their own lenses. Athena, the goddess she served so faithfully, looked down and saw not violation, but defilement of her temple. And like so many gods before her, she mistook punishment for purity. Her anger turned not toward the god who took, but toward the girl who was taken. When she appeared before Medusa, the air itself changed. The torches dimmed, the waves fell still. Athena's voice was cold as marble. "You have brought shame to this sacred place," she said.
Medusa tried to speak, to explain, to beg, but her words drowned in fear.
The goddess raised her hand. Light gathered, hard and blinding. When it faded, the temple smelled of stone and smoke. The girl was gone. In her place stood a figure trembling, half human, half myth. Her hair, once soft as seaweed, began to move on its own, twisting, hissing, alive. Each strand a serpent, born of rage and misunderstanding. Her skin gleamed faintly, too pale for life, too bright for death. And her eyes, her gentle eyes, became mirrors of stone. What she saw, she froze. What she loved, she lost. The world, which once turned kindly toward her, now turned away in fear. Even her reflection betrayed her. No mirror could hold her face without breaking. So she fled. Far from the temple, far from the cities of men, into the wild edges of the earth where cliffs meet the sea. There she built her solitude, stone by stone. Each statue that surrounded her was not trophy but tragedy, a reminder that every visitor came with a sword, never with mercy. Time moved differently in her exile. Seasons passed, and her grief hardened into patience. The serpents learned to sleep when she slept, to whisper when she dreamed. They were her only company. Strange, loyal, and alive with the rhythm of her sorrow. At night, she would walk to the shore. The waves still knew her name. The sea never forgot those it had once harmed.
Sometimes she would stare into the black water and almost see her old self reflected there, the girl who swept floors, who prayed, who believed.
But the water would ripple and the image would vanish. The stories that spread among mortals told nothing of this. They called her monster.
They spoke of her power, never her pain. They remembered her curse, not her innocence.
Men sailed across oceans to find her, seeking glory in her death. They did not come to understand, only to conquer. One of them was Perseus, son of Zeus, armed with divine gifts, a mirrored shield, a sword, winged sandals. The gods who had made her also sent him to destroy her. It was not justice, it was spectacle. And when he found her, she was sleeping.
The moonlight touched her face.
For a moment, he hesitated. Even through the reflection of his shield, he could see her beauty. Terrible, yes, but true. He raised his blade. The air held its breath. When it was done, the earth itself seemed to grieve. From her blood sprang winged creatures, Pegasus, the white horse of the skies, and Chrysaor, the warrior. From her death came flight, freedom, and fury. Even in defeat, she gave birth to symbols that could not be bound. The gods celebrated Perseus. They crowned him a hero, sang songs of triumph. But somewhere, deep in the sea where her story began, the waves turned darker. They remembered what he had done, and the wind carried her name, softly, not as warning, but as elegy. Medusa, not monster, but memory, not cursed, but silenced. A mortal punished for what a god had done. A woman made legend by the cruelty of those who could not bear her pain. And yet time has a strange mercy. As centuries passed, her story began to change. Artists painted her not as horror, but as strength. Poets whispered that her gaze did not kill, but revealed, turning the violent into stillness, the arrogant into truth. Her image, once feared, became sacred again, not for her beauty, but for her endurance. Now, when we speak her name, it carries a different weight. We see the girl beneath the serpents, the soul beneath the myth. We remember that even monsters were once gentle.
That silence is sometimes not surrender, but survival.
And somewhere, in the hush between waves, in the glint of moonlight on stone, her spirit still lingers, calm and unbroken, not seeking vengeance,
only peace.
Because the world did not destroy her, it transformed her. And transformation, however cruel, is its own kind of rebirth. So when you hear the sea at night, listen closely. Beneath the rhythm of the tide, you might hear a softer sound.
The rustle of serpents, the sigh of marble,
the whisper of a girl who once believed in gods and found instead her own power. Medusa, the beauty that turned into silence, and from silence into something eternal. The edge of the known world. The world saw only the curse, not the wound. They remembered the terror, not the tenderness that came before it. Stories spread faster than truth, and soon her name itself became a weapon. Whispered to frighten children, painted on shields to summon fear. Medusa fled to the edge of the known world, beyond mountains and marble cities, beyond even the maps that men had drawn in arrogance. She followed the wind until it carried no more voices, only the endless hush of the sea. There, where the cliffs dropped straight into foam, she built her exile. The air was cold but honest. Here, no one prayed, no one punished. Here, the silence did not accuse her.
It only existed, vast, patient, forgiving.
At night, the winds and waves whispered her name, but no one came. They spoke not in words, but in rhythm, in the slow, eternal sigh of water meeting stone. She would sit by the edge, her serpent sleeping against her shoulders, and listen to the only song that did not hurt. Time passed without form. Seasons blurred into each other. The moon waxed and waned, and she learned to live by its cycle. Bright when it shone, hidden when it vanished. She became myth before she became dust. The world continued without her, but her story wandered, reshaped, retold, rewritten by mouths that never knew her. To some she was a monster, to others a warning. Few remembered she had once been a girl. Years folded into centuries. And then, far away, in a kingdom that had forgotten mercy, a young man was born. Perseus, son of Zeus and a mortal queen. The gods had marked his life before he could speak. Prophecies followed him like shadows, speaking of fate, of conquest, of glory. When his king demanded proof of his worth, the challenge was cruel and clear. Bring me the head of Medusa, a task no mortal could survive. But the gods had their own designs, and their quiet conspiracies gathered around him like fog. Hermes found him first, messenger of boundaries, trickster of paths. He placed winged sandals at Perseus's feet. "They will carry you faster than fear," he said, his smile both kind and knowing. Then came Athena, her eyes sharp as the blade she carried. She offered him a mirrored shield, polished until it caught not only light, but destiny itself. "Do not look at her," she warned. "See only her reflection." For pity is as dangerous as pride. She did not speak of the girl Medusa once was. Perhaps she could not. Perhaps even gods prefer to forget the cruelty they allowed. So Perseus set out, guided by divine gifts, lifted by wind and ambition. He crossed the ocean like a silver arrow, cutting through cloud and salt. Below him stretched the wild places of the world, the ruins of forgotten shrines, the broken teeth of islands swallowed by time. Somewhere among them she waited, not as predator, but as prayer unanswered. When he reached her land, dawn had not yet broken. Mist lay thick across the rocks, veiling everything in quiet grey. He walked carefully, his sandals barely touching the ground. Around him stood shapes that were once men, warriors, wanderers, perhaps fools, now statues, frozen in the moment of their last breath. Their faces held terror, but also awe. They had seen something they could not comprehend. He moved deeper into the cave, holding the mirrored shield before him. The air was cool, scented with salt and something older, the faint metallic tang of stone newly cut. Each step echoed softly as though even sound feared to disturb her rest. And there she was, Medusa. Not the monster he had been told to expect, but a figure folded in sleep. Her hair, the serpent's, lay still, their bodies coiled like quiet rivers around her face. Her breathing was steady, her features almost peaceful. A woman caught between dream and memory. For a heartbeat, Perseus hesitated. The stories had not prepared him for this stillness. Through the reflection of his shield, he saw not rage, but weariness, the calm of one who has been hunted too long to run anymore. The cave flickered with the light of his torch, and for a fleeting instant it seemed the stone around her breathed.
He lifted his sword, and even then, something inside him faltered.
The gods had told him this act would bring glory. But glory feels hollow when it meets the quiet face of a sleeping woman. Still, fate does not pause for doubt. The blade fell. The wind rushed in, as if the world itself gasped. Her body stilled, then dissolved into silence once more. From the wound, light spilled. Brilliant, golden, impossible. It took shape as wings and fire, bursting upward through the roof of the cave. Pegasus rose, born from her blood, a creature of sky and freedom, the soul of what had been taken from her.
Beside him, another form, Chrysaor, the warrior, gleamed like a promise of vengeance or redemption.
Perseus staggered back, his sword trembling. He had his prize, yet he could not look at it. He wrapped her head in cloth, hiding the face that had once been grace. When he stepped out into daylight, the sea had turned still. The wind ceased. Even the gods were quiet. Far away on Olympus, Athena felt something stir, a shadow of regret perhaps, though she would never name it. Poseidon turned from the ocean, uneasy.
And somewhere deep below, where silence has no end, Medusa's story began to change.
Because myths do not end with death. They echo, they twist, they return, they find new mouths to speak them. And while the world praised the hero who slew the monster, the truth lingered like smoke, that what he killed was never the beast they feared, but the wound they refused to see. The head that could still see. A mirror to see her without seeing. Through its surface, the world bent. Light trembling like water, truth distorted by reflection. And with one silent stroke, he ended her story. The blade fell, quick as breath. The cave shuddered, and then the sound was gone. Where there had been a heartbeat, there was only stillness. The air thickened with salt and sorrow. Her body sank softly to the ground, as if even the earth grieved what it had been told to destroy. From her blood rose light, wild, unstoppable. Wings spread from the wound like forgiveness refusing to die. Pegasus leapt skyward, white as dawn, and Chrysaor followed, his blade flashing gold.
Even in her undoing, Medusa gave birth to beauty.
It was her last act of grace. Perseus stood frozen, his sword wet with a silence heavier than victory. He had done what was asked, completed the task that made heroes out of men. But no song rose to greet him, no triumph filled the cave. Only the sea spoke, low and endless, repeating her name against the cliffs. He wrapped her head carefully, almost tenderly, as though he feared to hurt her again. Then he left, wings at his feet, guilt in his hands. When he reached the world of the living, Athena was waiting. The goddess who had cursed her, who had shaped the weapon that would end her, now came to claim what remained. Without a word, Perseus offered the bundle. Athena lifted the cloth. For a moment, she did not move. The face that looked back was still beautiful, terrible in its calm. Eyes closed, lips parted slightly, as if still mid-prayer. The serpents, even severed, stirred faintly, remembering what it meant to live. Athena studied her creation and her sin. Then, slowly, she placed Medusa's head upon her shield. It fit there as though it had always belonged, a circle of reflection at the heart of her armor. The Gorgon's gaze would guard the goddess, turning enemy to stone, fear to defense, the symbol of terror born from the body of a victim. And so the story was told. How Athena, in her wisdom, claimed the monster's power. But the story never asked who gave her that power or why. The poets sang of triumph, not of transformation. They did not speak of the weight of that face, forever caught between life and loss. Years passed. Empires rose and fell beneath banners that bore her image. Warriors carved her likeness onto shields, onto temples, onto the gates of cities. They called her protector. They called her wrath. Never mercy, never memory. Her head became a weapon against fear, her name a spell of warning. But time changes the telling. Time softens the cruelty of gods and sharpens the truth of silence. And somewhere between those echoes, Medusa began to return, not as a monster, but as a mirror. Artists began to paint her differently, not screaming but still, not raging but remembering. Her serpents no longer hissed, they curled like vines, like thoughts too deep to voice. Her eyes no longer cursed, they remembered. They remembered what was done to her. They remembered the temple and the salt, the god who took, the goddess who turned away. They remembered the centuries of exile, the quiet dignity of survival. They remembered that power and pain are often the same inheritance. And those who looked upon her began to see something new. Not horror, but recognition. The reflection of their own endurance, staring quietly back. For what is Medusa, if not every soul, that has been blamed for its own suffering? Every voice turned to silence, every beauty twisted into warning. Her face became the truth the world could no longer hide from, that from violation can rise strength and from silence can grow defiance. In her gaze there is no hatred now, only knowledge. The kind that sees too much and forgives too little, yet continues to exist. The kind that holds both pain and power in the same breath. Sometimes, when the moon falls across the ruins of old temples, her reflection still flickers, not in marble, but in water. The sea that once betrayed her now keeps her secrets. Waves touch the rocks where she once walked, as if apologizing for their witness. The wind hums through broken columns, soft and low, almost like her voice returning. If you listen, you can almost hear her whisper, "I am not your warning. I am your reminder that beauty is never safe, that silence has its own strength, and that even the cursed can become sacred." And so her story endures, not in fear, but in understanding. She is every woman who learned to live after being turned to stone. Every soul that found grace inside the wound. Every name rewritten by time until truth shone through the cracks of legend. Medusa, not the monster, but the mirror.
Not the curse, but the courage.
Her eyes, once a punishment, became a promise. To see clearly, to endure quietly, to remain unbroken. The world saw only the curse. But she at last remembered the wound and turned it into light. Echoes of the gods. The gods fade, but their echoes remain. Their temples crumble, their names soften into dust, yet something of them lingers, not in marble or thunder, but in us.
The fire on Olympus dims.
The sea grows still. The winds no longer carry names. But the air still hums with what they once were, shapes of emotion carved in light and air, breath and memory. For gods were never only beings of power. They were mirrors, reflections of what we feared, what we longed for, what we could not yet name within ourselves. When Zeus raised his hand and thunder broke the sky, it was not divinity alone that moved. It was the human hunger to control what cannot be controlled. His lightning was not just fire. It was desire, restless and unguarded, the need to be obeyed, the fear of being unseen. And from his storms we learned both awe and caution. We learned that power, when untamed, can light the world or burn it. When Psyche walked through shadow and silence in search of love, she carried something all mortals share, the fragile courage to continue.
She stumbled, doubted, fell asleep in despair, and still she rose.
Her story was never about perfection. It was about persistence, about learning that love, when stripped of illusion, is not an arrow through the heart, but a hand reaching into darkness, searching for another heartbeat. From her, we learned that the soul's journey is long, but never wasted, that even the smallest act of faith, to take one more step, is sacred. Medusa's gaze was once called a curse. But what is a curse, if not a truth the world refuses to face?
She looked upon cruelty and turned it still.
She made the violent pause, made the arrogant confront their own reflection. Her silence became defiance, her solitude a kind of holiness. She was not the monster they feared, she was the wound they caused, and in time even fear had to bow before her endurance. From her, we learned that pain, when carried long enough, becomes vision. That those who survive their own ruin learn to see the world more clearly than gods ever could. And somewhere in the quiet between these stories, there is another presence. Gentle, constant, unnoticed. Hestia. The goddess who never fought, never boasted, never demanded worship. While others ruled the heavens or the seas, she ruled the hearth.
Her fire was small, but it burned for all.
It warmed the weary, it lit the path home. She kept peace alive when war had exhausted the world. Her flame was the memory of stillness, the reminder that not all power must roar. Sometimes it only needs to glow. So the gods faded, as all things do.
Their statues cracked, their temples sank beneath ivy and time.
But their stories endured, not as commands, but as whispers. They became the languages of feeling, Zeus's thunder, the will to act. Psyche's journey, the endurance to love. Medusa's gaze, the courage to remember. Hestia's flame, the quiet art of peace. Even now, when no one kneels at their altars, we still live among their remnants. We call it anger, hope, grief, tenderness, But they are the same old gods wearing new faces. They move through us, unseen but near, in every act of forgiveness, in every spark of defiance, in every silent prayer said not to the sky, but to the self. Because perhaps Olympus was never above us at all. Perhaps it was always inside the mountain within the heart, where storms and stillness meet. The place where power learns mercy and pain learns to speak softly. So let the thunder fade, let the fire burn low. The sea will rest, the wind will sleep, and what remains will not be ruins, but rhythm, the quiet pulse of stories that refuse to die. If you listen closely, you can still hear them. Zeus rumbling faintly in the distance, Psyche's footsteps on the long road home, Medusa's whisper beneath the tide, and Hestia's flame, patient and unwavering, waiting for the next traveler to draw near. The gods fade, yes, but their echoes remain.
They live in the light we strike in darkness.
In the love that survives its trials, in the strength born from pain, in the warmth we keep for one another when the world grows cold, and when the night falls quiet, and your thoughts slow to the rhythm of breath, perhaps that is Olympus returning, not in thunder or command, but in peace. The quiet sorrow of Medusa. Embers in the dark. Myth, after all, is not about gods. It is about the quiet places inside us, the hidden rooms where pride, love, and grief still breathe. Long after the temples crumble, after the marble returns to dust, something of them remains within the pulse of every living thing. The old world sleeps now. Its altars are empty, its fires cooled to ash. No incense drifts upward toward Olympus. No hymns rise through the mountain air. The thunder has grown tired, the seas have learned stillness, even the winds have forgotten their names. Yet the stories remain. They flicker like embers in the dark. Soft, slow, endless, they do not command. They simply wait, glowing faintly in the corners of memory, warming the spaces that reason cannot reach.
For myth was never only history. It was a language of feeling.
Zeus's lightning, the spark of power we fear and crave. Psyche's journey, the ache to love what cannot be seen. Medusa's gaze, the transformation of pain into strength.
Hestia's flame, the stillness that holds the world together.
Each story, a mirror. Each god, a reflection of what we carry quietly within ourselves. When we tell these tales, we are not worshipping the past. We are remembering what it means to be alive, the longing, the mistakes, the small forgivenesses, the hunger for light in the middle of the night. We keep speaking their names because they remind us that even the divine once stumbled, and even the mortal once touched eternity. The old world may sleep, but its dreams wander still. They move through our hearts in strange disguises, in the courage to begin again,
in the tenderness that follows grief,
in the patience to wait for morning. Listen long enough, and you might hear them, a murmur beneath your thoughts, a rhythm under your breath. Not command, not prophecy.
Just presence.
Because myth does not end. It only changes form. From marble to memory, from prayer to pulse, from story to silence. And in that silence, something gentle survives, the understanding that we too are part of the same long telling. A human echo in an ancient song, a spark in the ashes of Olympus. The gods may fade, the mountains may fall, but the stories, they keep their small light, their patient warmth, their invitation to rest.
So,
Let the noise fade, the myths are not gone. They are only sleeping inside you.
where all beginnings wait to be remembered.